Hello, my name is Kelsey Zelma Herx. You can call me Zelma, and welcome to another Shakespeare in 15 minutes. After Cymbeline last week and Midsummer Night's Dream the week before, I decided I wasn't quite done with Shakespeare's take on the ancients. So this week I'll be summarizing Shakespeare's Iliad fanfiction, Troilus and Cressida. Hi, buddy. I find Troilus and Cressida an absolutely thrilling play. It is one of my favorites. I adore it. It took me no less than a read-through, 2 staged readings, and 1 production to really understand what the plot is, which is odd because it's actually very linear and simple, with only 1 major overarching plot line as told by 2 smaller plot lines representing 2 different sides of the war. The wakes and eddies of a turbulent time can really be explored fully by looking very closely at individuals, which is exactly what theater is best at, so good job, Shakespeare. And they take a look at the difference between those who can fight physically for their survival and those who cannot. This play is about the Trojan War. Let's just say it's a good thing I'm not even close to being monetized, because this video would be demonetized so quickly my head would spin. It also uses and venereal disease as a metaphor for war and vice versa. I'm not going to get into that too much because it's more in the text than the plot, but just to be ready for that if you ever decide to pick it up and take a look yourself. It also features the threat of rape as a major character motivation, so yeah, be ready for that too. In Shakespeare's day, there was this big revival of the classics, translations and poems about all of it, and Troilus and Cressida would have been as ubiquitous to Shakespeare and his contemporaries as Romeo and Juliet is to us now. Everyone knew what happened, which is probably why the story beats are not very clear in this play as they are in some of his others. So it's up to us, the directors and the actors, to make sure that every single moment follows the previous one. Alright, Troilus and Cressida. The play opens towards the end of the Trojan War. Everyone's been there for a really long time and it's getting a little tiring. We start with the Trojans. The Trojan scenes are all very cushy, very indoors. The Trojans are winning at this point. All they have to do is defend. So they're kind of calling the shots of the war. They get to come home to their wives after fighting all day. They have parties. They're really not worried. On the Trojan side, the important characters are Priam, the king. He's the king. His sons, Hector, our soldier philosopher. He is noble and good and does everything right, and it works out great for him in the end. We have Paris. Fucking Paris. All of this is his fault, and I think that literally every time he's on stage, I imagine pretty much every character thinks the same thing too. This does not seem to bother him, but in case you don't know the story, he's the one that seduced and stole away Helen of Troy. We have Troilus, baby of the family, sweet lad, kind of boring. We also have Cassandra. Poor Cassandra. She spends all her time screaming prophecies and being ignored. I have never seen a production that knows what to make of her. We have Helen of Troy and Andromache, Hector's wife. They're both in it, but they don't play very important roles. They're just in 1 scene each, and yeah, I'm not going to get into it because they're not really important. What's important is to know that the Trojans get to come home at the end of the day, and that's partly why the war affects them so differently than it does the Greeks. We get Pandarus, and he is where we get the word pander. And pander used to be a word for, so pander used to be a word to describe an individual who procures company, usually female company, for another individual. And we have Cressida, Pandarus's niece, or cousin once removed, I don't really know. Cressida's father has left Troy and defected to the Greek side, so her social situation is kind of precarious. In the first few scenes, Pandarus is trying to broker a marriage between Troilus, the prince, and his cousin, Cressida. Some sort of agreement of marriage, if not a marriage outright. Troilus is already very on board, but Pandarus is having a hard time getting any kind of answer out of Cressida. They have this exchange that I think exemplifies both Cressida's character and the theme of survival at any cost that runs throughout the entire, and I think it's beautiful, so I'm gonna say it. Pandarus says, "You are such a woman. One knows not at what ward you lie. Upon my back to defend my belly, upon my wit to defend my wiles, upon my secrecy to defend mine honesty, my mask to defend my beauty, and you to defend all of these. And at all these wards, I lie at 1,000 watches. But when Pandarus leaves, she turns to the audience and is like, actually, I really do like Troilus. I'm just afraid to let anyone know. So if anyone says there's a debate whether Cressida ever actually loved Troilus, there's no debate. She says it, so it's true. Shakespeare characters do not lie in audience asides. They just don't. When they're talking to the audience, that is the moment they're being completely honest. So Cressida loves Troilus. It's true. Next we go to the Greek camps. We have Nestor, the resident old guy. Menelaus, he's the reason we're all here. He's Helen's husband. We have Agamemnon, the general. He's a little too proud, but weirdly doesn't play that much of a role in this play. Ulysses, the smooth-talking politician. We have Ajax, our meathead. Big strong boy, but oh, so dumb. Making fun of him is almost like punching down. Almost, but not quite, because if you make fun of him, the only punching that will happen is him punching you. We have Achilles. You know who Achilles is. In this play, Achilles is deep in the I won't dance, don't ask me part of his character arc. He's not fighting. It's not super important in this play why, but he's just not fighting. We have Patroclus, Achilles' boyfriend. Thersites, the clown. Gotta have a clown. He mostly spends his time making fun of Ajax and Patroclus because those are the two that give him the biggest reaction. So one of the reasons this play isn't done very often is because the speeches, while beautiful, are so long. Ulysses, the politician, especially loves to hear himself talk. And all the Greek generals are so interchangeable that it's really up to the actor to make them distinctive in any way. The other thing is, while they're all kind of boring and interchangeable, they can't be merged into one character very easily because they all have to do the one thing that they have to do. So, like, Menelaus and Agamemnon, text-wise, they could totally be merged into one character, but Menelaus has to be the guy that was cucked. Agamemnon has to be the general, and they can't be the same guy because then you'll have both the Shakespeare nerds and the classicists up your ass, and I do not with classicists. They will come for you. All this to say, the first scene in the Greek camp is like 50 hours long, and they have these long ass speeches that in literally any other play would be the 11 o'clock number, but there's just like 5 of them. But all you need to know is that Achilles won't fight, spending too much time with his boyfriend, who is a bad influence on him because he's making fun of us, and Achilles and all the other men aren't taking us seriously anymore. They're interrupted by a Trojan who is like, hey, so Hector, one of our princes, you know, the one that's a really good fighter, he wants to end this war on single combat. Are you guys down? And the Greeks are like, yeah. Ulysses pulls Nestor aside and is like, hey, I know you're all thinking that Achilles is the guy we should send, but I think Achilles is a little too full of himself these days, and he needs some humble pie, and everyone knows he's our best guy, even the Trojans, so if Hector wins, they'll know we just wasted our best guy. So let's send Ajax instead. Cut to Ajax, our big strong meathead. Thersites the clown is mocking him and getting beat up for it, but he perseveres in the name of humor. Achilles and Patroclus enter. The highlight basically is that Thersites calls Patroclus Achilles' bitch. Meanwhile, back in Troy, Priam's son debate whether to keep fighting this dumb war. Hector is like, we should just send her back. She is not worth all of the blood that's been shed. Troilus and Paris want to keep fighting. Something, honor, whatever. It's not really about honor, but you gotta say it's about honor to convince Hector. Cassander screeches in the background that they're all going to lose and die. They ignore her, and Hector is won over to their side and agrees to keep at it. Back at the Greek tents, the generals all gather around to see if Achilles has come around to fighting again. He has not. Ulysses, the politician, begins the work of fluffing up Ajax's ego. All the other generals follow suit. Back in Troy, Pandarus has successfully managed to get Troilus and Cressida in the same place, a garden after dark, where they profess their love to each other. I find this scene really touching. In a time of war, in a time of great uncertainty, Cressida has kept all of her true feelings close to her chest, locked safely away so she can do what needs to be done to survive. And now, what she's being pushed to do to survive and what she wants are finally lining up. She loves Troilus, and he's a prince. He can keep her safe, and he wants to keep her safe. It's finally all going to work out if she can just lock down this one thing. So they get kind of married. Pandarus holds their hands and makes them promise, and then they go have sex. In the very next scene, in a moment of breathtaking callousness, Cressida's father, who, remember, defected to the Greek side before the play even started, makes a deal with the Greek generals to trade a valuable Trojan prisoner for his daughter, Cressida. Maybe he just wants his daughter back, but he must know the danger he'll be bringing her into by bringing her into a camp of of soldiers, and he's not even there to greet her when she arrives, so what the fuck, dude? No conversation, no warning, and everything she's built to scratch out a tiny little piece of safety for herself is obliterated. And in this scene, it's like a minor point on the general's docket. They just are like, okay, yeah, let's do that. It's devastating. Next scene, still in the Greek camps. Everyone pretends not to notice Achilles, and he's like, hey, how come no one's trying to get me to fight? And Ulysses is like, oh, everyone's moved on to Ajax now. And Achilles is affronted. Back in Troy, Troilus and Cressida must part ways in the morning. They have not slept. Troilus meets some folks on his way out, and they tell him the news that Cressida is to be traded away for a valuable prisoner of war. And Troilus is like, oh, damn, that sucks. Hey, don't tell anyone I was here, okay? Cressida gets the news next and is outraged and devastated and refuses to go, but she doesn't really have a choice. Troilus and Cressida say a tearful goodbye, and he makes her promise to stay true to him like 5 times. And she's like, wow, you really don't trust me, huh? Troilus then hands her off to a Greek and is like, hey, you've got a really special lady here. You treat her with respect, you hear me? And the Greek is like, look, you're cute, but as soon as you're gone, I'm gonna do whatever I want with her. I imagine Cressida hearing this conversation happening about her and just clicking back into survival mode, like, okay, this is going to happen. How am I going to make it the least terrible I can? In the very next scene, all the Greek soldiers stand around to greet her and take turns kissing her, one by one. It is profoundly uncomfortable, but she laughs it off and jokes and jabs at them, has some witty banter, and quickly manages to scrape some sort of rapport with them. She is then brought to her father, and once she's gone, Ulysses, who started the whole everyone should kiss Cressida thing, is like, God, what a slut. Hey, Ulysses? Hey, bud. Fuck you. That night, a bunch of Trojans pop by the Greek camps to come watch the single combat thing with Hector. Hector and Ajax fight. Hector, well, it depends on how you stage it, but I've only ever seen it that Hector wins. But he does not kill Ajax because they're cousins, and Hector is very noble, and that would be wrong. Okay, Hector. Achilles struts out, and Hector seems unimpressed. Will the insults never end? Achilles vows to fight and kill Hector the next day. Thersites the clown keeps teasing Patroclus, and then hands Achilles a letter. The letter is from Hecuba, Queen of Troy, with a token of love from her daughter, a princess that we have not met, reminding him he made a vow of love to the princess and that he shouldn't fight. Achilles is like, damn, I really wanted to kill Hector, but I did make a vow, and he tells Patroclus that he's not going to fight after all. Classicists get mad at Shakespeare, not me. Troilus asks Ulysses to take him to see Cressida. Not even. He asks help in spying on Cressida. And the two sit in the bushes and eavesdrop as one of the Greeks flirts with her, and she flirts right back. It's up to the director how fickle she is in this scene, but I think it plays best if she knows she's being watched by other Greek soldiers because A, what moment is really private in a military camp? And B, if she knows she's being watched, what better way to demonstrate to those other soldiers that she is off limits than to clearly demonstrate that she's with another Greek soldier? You really think, oh no, sorry, I have a boyfriend back in Troy, is really going to stop these guys? Get real. But then she does turn to the audience and say, well, that's not really an aside. I mean, she does turn and say, I'm sorry, Troilus, I've moved on, sweetie. And so I guess on some level, it is true. I guess you could interpret it that she is a slutty, fickle asshole who doesn't keep her promises, but I will always think that the more interesting choice is fight or flight is a hell of a drug. I've been doing research for this video, and I'm actually disgusted how many scholars take this transformation, who take Ulysses' assessment of her at face value with no acknowledgement of the precariousness of her situation. After Shakespeare took the time to flesh her out and make her an entirely realized three-dimensional character and give her so much more internal conflict than the other popular contemporary depictions of her in Shakespeare's day, I don't understand how you can just take all this as her being a bad person. But this is not an analysis, it's just a summary, so let's move on. Troilus is sad, and he has a speech with lots of O's and aw sounds, which usually means that the character is crying. He vows to kill that guy out on the battlefield. I told you the plot is very simple. We are already almost done. The next day, Hector's wife Andromache and his sister Cassandra beg him not to fight. He ignores them and goes out onto the battlefield. The battle happens. Achilles is not fighting. Thersites the clown is just running around, kind of narrowly avoiding being killed by being a clown. Patroclus dies, and his body is brought to Achilles, who goes into a rage and joins the fray. He fights Hector, but not one-on-one. He instead brings a group of soldiers and mobs and kills him in a very dishonorable manner. I am so sorry, classicists. We don't even get the Achilles-Hector knockdown, drag-out fight that we were hoping for, that we've been gearing up for 2 hours. Achilles then ties the body to his chariot, drags it around the battlefield. The Trojans are devastated, and Troilus leads the retreat. And on the way back to the city, he curses Pandarus, who turns to the audience and is like, hey, what did I do? And that's pretty much the end. It's not a satisfying ending. There's very little resolution. We never see Cressida again. Honor and hope are meaningless in war. Love is outranked by the needs of survival. And an old pander bequeaths unto the audience his venereal diseases. And we are meant to realize, I think, that war is just as empty and pointless and cruel as whoring and rape. Bad for the soul, bad for the body, and everyone who goes through it comes out of it a little more rotted than they were before. But it still happens because men have something to prove. And as long as men do have something to prove, Pandarus tells us, someone like him will always be there to facilitate the exchange. The end. So you can probably guess why this play isn't done very often. It is very bleak, but I think people are cowards, and they should, because this play is great. I love Cressida. I have a ton of empathy for her. She, more than anyone else in the play, more than Troilus, more than Hector, more than Achilles, she is the only one that really gets what war is about. It's not about honor. It's not about who's right. It's not about who is the better fighter. It's about power, and those who can impose their powers on others, and those who cannot. And those who cannot have to find a way to come out of it all alive. And she found her way and has been maligned throughout history for it ever since. The reason I used that word for sex work in the closing paragraph of the summary is I wanted to express the dehumanizing way in which men of this time, both in Shakespeare's day and the time the play is set, saw the women that they engaged in paid sex with. Also, sex work was just different back then. Only very rarely an empowered choice. I might do a whole video on it someday because it's pretty interesting, but it's a bleak play, but I really like it, and I would really recommend seeking out an audio recording if you can. Highly recommended. Okay, with that, this was kind of a shorter one, I think, which is great. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you again next Thursday. Bye! Thank you. They'll know we just blew our best gut.